Well, welcome to today's presentation. And today, we're live. Excellent. Welcome to today's presentation from Solar Costa Rica. And we're presenting from Conchal Papaya Restaurant and Hotel in Brasilito, except we're actually not. We are in our office in San Rafael de Alajuela today, and we are presenting on, let's get this slideshow up here, and a second here to get this together. Okay, that wasn't exactly what I was looking for. There we are now, and we'll get the screen cleared off so that we have our slideshow. Oh, the title today is Now Anyone Can Save Money with Real Solar. Not taking too much of a poke at solar air conditioners, but if you're looking to really save money and have a system that's guaranteed for much longer than the life of an air conditioner, I would look at solar for your entire house. So we are Solar Costa Rica. We have certifications in NABCEP for PV installation, Performance Institute in energy auditing, among other things. So who are we? Well, Solar Costa Rica has been installing solar in Costa Rica since 1995, actually. We have a 20-year-old solar heating system that's still working, among others, but it's one that I visited last year. And Solar Costa Rica was incorporated in 2004. I'm John Harrington, the president of Solar Costa Rica. I have 35 years of contracting experience, 8 years of installing solar in the United States, also installed in Nicaragua, Mexico, and Costa Rica. And Jose Sandoval Arce is our engineer. He was the #1 graduate in electrical engineering at University of Costa Rica in 2014. And he's doing his thesis on solar energy. So if you're looking to have a design done professionally by someone who can get it through the permitting process very easily, that is Jose. Our head electrician is Timothy Zach. Timothy has 32 years as a International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers electrician, and he specializes in industrial, electrical, and motor control systems. And then our board of directors, I'm president and have the NABCEP certification. We also have on our board is Joe Tanner. He's been installing solar. Well, he installed solar back in Colorado back in the 1980s with a good friend of mine, Phil Huff. And after that, Joe went on to teach the shuttle pilots how to land the shuttle, and then got accepted into the astronaut program, where he made 4 missions into space, including fixing the Hubble telescope. If you remember when it was out of focus, he and Noriega went up and installed the corrective lens. And then he also, his biggest projects, I think, installing solar was large arrays on the International Space Station. Ed Furphy is also a member of our board. Ed is owner of Just Solar LLC in the United States. He installs 13 megawatts of solar per month. Costa Rica actually right now has 6.5 megawatts total. So what Costa Rica has, apparently Ed's company installs in 2 weeks, which is a little bit behind the times for Costa Rica. Anyway, and Alan Harrington is also our environmentalist. He's an environmental research scientist out of Colorado State University. And I would just put a couple of nice fancy photos of solar. Just a lot of people are wondering in Costa Rica. I do get this question of whether it actually works. Well, we're running the space station with it, and that's a picture of Joe, one of our board members, on the left, with the large array in the background. And by the way, that large array is about the length of a football field. So very interesting that two workers can go out there and unfurl one of those arrays. And obviously, they have a system set up to be able to do that. Ed's projects are more back here on Earth, but larger scale, and those tend to be your large rooftops, so, along with other ground-mounted systems. This being an IKEA building that they did the installation on the rooftop in the U.S. And here's one of our versions of that is Asada San Rafael. We installed the first solar array on a municipal well in Central America, running that municipal well with solar energy. And before we put the solar in, we also put in some motor control that would reduce the demand for the motor along with the amount of electricity it uses. I actually was there today, and we have, let's see, over the last 8 months, there's system. We produced 27,000 kilowatt hours on one inverter, 24,000 kilowatt hours on the other inverter, almost 25. And the reason there's a difference between inverters is shade does happen. And there's a tree there on the solar array that the one inverter works from. And there's a little difference in between one and the other, only because there's some shading during January. Those times of the year, the sun is actually 11 degrees south of, I'm sorry, 23 degrees south. Right now, the sun is actually north of. So you have to take that into account when you're looking at shading. You're not looking at just the south side. And this is another picture of the Asada San Rafael project. It's a 10 meter by 10 meter tank. And as you can see, we've installed the solar pretty much in one plane. We had to break up the plane on the north end of the tank, but all of those cutouts are made functionally so that they can access certain ports and so on the water tank itself. And that array is, as you see, is actually 3 different arrays. One is on the tank rooftop, one is on the pump house shed rooftop, and the other one is a ground mount, but they all appear to be relatively in the same plane. That's the way we designed it. It also is, as you would find here in Costa Rica, there's a lot of, the framework is done with local welders, and we designed this system so that it would meet for earthquake prevention. If you see in the upper left, there's a gap in the panels. That's because one of the arrays is actually attached to the pump house and the other is attached to the tank. And then down below, it's all ground mount. So how are Coop Guanacaste and USAID implementing their solar program? And how can you save money by going solar? What's the process to go solar? We're also going to look at what's your expected return and how secure is your solar investment. And my biggest question is, when do I start? So Coop Guanacaste has been fairly progressive with their setup to open people up to doing distributed generation or solar. This is a brochure that's available at any desk where you go in to pay your electric bill, and it's several pages long, and it gives you the whole explanation of how you can go solar. It's also online, as you can see. This was taken off of one of their web pages, and this is their application process, or one of the pages of their application process. You can actually apply for it yourself. What you do have to do, though, is get an engineer, such as Jose, to do the engineered stamped drawing. And then Coop Guanacaste doesn't come in and do the inspection beyond the meter. They rely on the engineer that did the design to sign off with a letter sent to them that the installation was done according to the drawing. Then you have ISE, and ISE, we all know that Costa Rica was 99% renewable energy this last year. ISE is going heavily with hydroelectric power, but I don't know if you know that there is actually 28% of the installed capacity for Costa Rica is generated. It's thermal plants that run bunker fuel, and bunker fuel is, well, we could also call that bitumen. If you want to get down to the an international name for it is tar sand. Everybody is aware of the Keystone XL controversy and the tar sands, so you can guess that the bunker fuel burning plants here wouldn't necessarily be as clean as, say, natural gas or some of the other ways to produce electricity other than from renewable resources such as solar, wind, and hydro. So Costa Rica is 99% renewable. And this is a quote from an article I just read today. Recognizing both of the nation's need for energy security, should the hydropower systems ever fail, and continued dependence on hydrocarbons for transport, among other activities, Recope took action. On December 15th, they approved a plan to construct 12 new fuel storage tanks, as well as a new port along the Caribbean, specifically designed for petroleum ships. So is Costa Rica totally moving towards wholly renewable energy? That action right there, I don't think would actually back that up. So the long-term goal for you, I would assume, and a lot of us, is to save money, of course, and add value to your investment. On the left is a infrared photo. We do energy audits, and this particular photo is taken inside an ice factory. You can see the difference in, well, you can't really see the temperature difference on that, but often you can with readings for high and low temperatures, but the temperature inside the ice factory at 34 degrees centigrade was rather warm when you're trying to make ice. And what you're seeing there in the blue is an uninsulated pipe from the compressors going into the cooling tanks. So we're working with them to help improve their production and actually save quite a bit of money for them. And on the right-hand side is one of our earlier installations. I believe that was in 2010. And that was in Colorado. Those particular panels were some of the first ones that were put in with microinverters, and we use microinverters quite a bit now. It simplifies the process and makes it so that you have an inverter on your roof that actually has the same warranty that your panels have, which is 25 years. And so the question of how do you increase the value of your home? Well, here's a study that was done by Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory along with Stanford University. A couple quotes from that. Homes with PV in California have sold for a premium expressed in dollars per watt installed of approximately $3.90 to $6.40 a watt. And that study included 72,000 California homes that were sold from 2000 to 2009, with approximately 2,000 of which had a PV system on them at the time of the sale. Now you can look at that cost per watt. It may have gone down since 2009, but you're actually paying quite a bit less to install solar than what those figures are anyway. And so, plus the fact that you're making electricity. So what's a present situation? Well, you're paying too much for electricity. I mean, I hear that all the time. Now, I don't know what too much is necessarily, but you're paying a lot. You're most likely wasting energy. Even I waste energy, and I try to keep that to a minimum. And if say you're a hotel owner, you're charging the extra cost off of that wasted electricity to your clients. Or maybe you're just complaining about the high cost of energy in Costa Rica. And I hear that a lot from expatriates that have homes there, that it's just outrageously expensive. Part of that is the way that your house or hotel is built, and it's really not made for air conditioning. And now you're adding that to it. The power company ISE is the main power company here in Costa Rica. They produce fairly expensive electricity. I can't say that it's more expensive than the United States, but it is not subsidized like it is for fossil fuels in the U.S. So you get those charges carried across to you. If you're a Guanacaste, of course, you get electricity that was sold to Guanacaste from ISE, and then it's resold again to you, so that price again goes up. Another thing about electricity in Guanacaste and other areas of Costa Rica, but we've certainly found this out in Guanacaste areas, is the electricity power in your home is of fairly poor quality. When you get to the end of the transmission lines, there are problems trying to keep it stable in frequency or quality of the sine wave, along with the voltage. Voltage seems to be going up much higher and lower than what we're normally used to in the United States. So the same with appliances and electronics. They're built for a fairly stable grid, have a little more of a trouble with a grid that is quite a bit out of those parameters. So when you install solar, you keep in mind that you are producing a pure sine wave at a relatively narrower voltage range, and therefore you're actually improving the power that goes into your motors, your electronics, motors being compressors such as on air conditioners and refrigerators and that type of thing, in addition to the electronics that run your computer, your TV, and so on. Costa Rica also increases in demand. They experience an increase of over 6% a year because of growth and actually, there's a lot of people that want more electronics, and it is what we call a developing country, so we're developing a higher demand. For a 5-year period, that means 30% more electricity has to be produced. We can't store it now to use it then. 30% more has to be produced in 5 years than is being produced today. Guanacaste has some of the best sun on earth to produce electricity, and that's something that you should keep in mind as a customer. Does solar work? Well, if you were in other parts of the earth, you wouldn't be able to make nearly as much electricity, and we'll move on to show you how other people have done that, and they have much worse potential to make that power. And the other thing about your present situation, I'm assuming that you want to help with the environmental issues of this planet at the same time. So let's look at the sun in Guanacaste. This is a map of a study that was done in 2014, and that gives you some idea of how many kilowatt hours you can produce per 1,000 watts of electricity installed on your roof. So if you were in the northern zone, which is the worst in the country because of rain and clouds, you're looking at 1,222 kilowatt hours per year per 1,000 watts installed. In Guanacaste, you could add another 300 kilowatt hours to that. So 1,524 kilowatt hours, or just figure 1,500 kilowatt hours per 1,000 watts installed, should give you an idea of what your potential is to produce electricity. We go back to what we mentioned about countries that are far beyond Costa Rica in install capacity. And let's look at Germany. If you look up there in Berlin, the amount of sunshine you have is down in around the 900 kilowatt hours per square meter, as opposed to well, if you get into the little bit brighter areas of Germany, you're going to get up to almost 1,000 kilowatt hours per square meter. This is through Solar GIS, which is a computer modeling of sun using weather data stations and satellites. And then we look at Germany. What have they done? In 2014, Germany breaks 3 solar power records in 2 weeks. And despite being quite a gray country with an average solar irradiation levels worse than the U.S. Northwest and Alaska, Germany is the solar power leader. About 1.5 million photovoltaic systems have been installed in Germany. Of course, that's a country of 80 million people, and we're only a country of 5 or 6. So if you look at the sun in Costa Rica, even the worst parts of Costa Rica have or better than the best parts of Germany. So you wonder, why are we behind? Well, it's policy, and it's also people just haven't learned yet about how they actually can save money by putting this in. But if you look at Guanacaste, even in Liberia, you're looking at about 2,000 to 2,100 kilowatt hours per square meter. And let's look at that. It's opposed to, say, Germany, which was 900. It's more than double. So the development up to present, well, ISE had a pilot program. The Plan Piloto was for 10 megawatts total for any type of distributed generation of renewable energy. They sold off the last 4.5 megawatts was for one plant of biomass burning. So that closed the program last year. And we ended up with 5.5 megawatts to installed distributed generation and 1 megawatt of commercial scale, if you want to refer to that as that. But 1 megawatt is at Mirabayas as a solar farm. Guanacaste had no potential program at all for net metering up until this point. So obviously anybody who's living there, this is all brand new, and it would be something to look at as an alternative to keep paying and renting your power. Now, at Solar Costa Rica, we were in Guanacaste territory since 2012. Back in 2012, 2013, we actually started our own pilot program with the engineers in the generation department there at Guanacaste, and us to put in some small systems that were for self-consumption so that they could see how this works and so on. Because we assured them that they would not have to pay for any excess generation, because we weren't going to be doing any excess generation. And in November 2015, the Attorney General actually made a self-consumption a law, so that if you are consuming the electricity that you're producing at any point in time during the day, you do not have to get a permit or a contract with the power company. So that reduces those permit fees and what we'll see later on as the access fee. In April 2016, RSEP opened net metering back up with access fees and permit fees. It's a little bit more costly to go solar now than it was during the pilot program, but it certainly is much cheaper than continuing to pay the power company from here to eternity. And Guanacaste, they opened their program up. They actually have the lowest fees in the country. Because Guanacaste has to buy all their power, they don't produce it. They're not looking at you as a competitor with their monopoly, unlike the big guys there, ISE, though, because they're not that excited about competition, they have the highest fees in Costa Rica for installing solar. Yet those fees are still lower than what we used to pay in the United States back when I was doing installations there for permitting and access to the power company's grid. So you actually had to pay for building permits and electrical permits in addition to your access fees to the power grid, and that actually brings your initial installation outside costs up higher. And that has developed, or the banks are looking at, and some are doing. Bank of Costa Rica has a green energy loan program right now, and that program is allowing you to borrow money to put in a solar array at 1% lower than you would normally borrow money for construction. It also has an origination fee that's half the price of their standard origination fee. So if you're a bank, that only makes sense that not paying any extra out of their monthly income if they go with solar, because they're actually just paying the bank instead of the power company. So it's good business for banks. It's good business for the consumer. This is one of the plan pilota or pilot program installations we did in Guanacaste. This is actually at in Playa Grande, and they not only installed solar, but we did an energy audit and we did some changes in their energy use, changed everything over to LED bulbs, and added in the solar. We even actually looked at things such as in the grocery store, just moving the coolers away from the west wall, which got really hot in the afternoon, especially when people are opening and closing doors all the time. And what happened was we reduced their power consumption by almost half. Of the Asada San Rafael project, this was kind of a pilot program project, although it did not fit under that jurisdiction. Still, it was done before the new program started out, and it was in actually CNFL territory. CNFL is another power company that is allowing solar, as are all of them, due to the ARCEP regulations. You got to say the quality. You want to look at quality when you're doing solar installations. This particular project was what was placed on two separate buildings plus a ground mount. So we wanted it all to look nice and all stay in the same plane and line up. So even though if you see a crack in between those panels up in the upper left, that's because those are actually set on two different buildings, and all of that cross bracing, gusseting, and so on was designed for earthquake resistance. And that's something else you really need to look at, is to make sure that when you have somebody that says, oh, I can just put a ground mount up and weld it together, you got to make sure that it actually will hold together in an earthquake. So let's look at the cost to compare distributed generation between ICE and Guanacaste. We prefer to more accentuate how Guanacaste is doing, just because this presentation is for that Guanacaste area. But as far as ICE, there are certain fixed costs when you go to put in a system. You have the feasibility study, which is 90,000 colones. Your inspection and connection fee is 80,000 colones. If you have to have it inspected a second time because you didn't do it right, that's another 80,000 colones. Your bidirectional meters cost you 25,000, along with your production meter costs you 25,000. So the total is about 300,000, plus the additional cost because you have a second meter with their permitting process. You have to pay for the meter socket and wiring that up. So look at another 150,000 colones. And the tarifa de acceso is the access fee for running your meter backwards. So try to explain that is, in the daytime, if you are not using electricity and you're producing electricity, your meter goes backwards. That's what net metering is, meaning that you can produce your own electricity during the daytime. If you don't use it, your meter turns backwards 1 kilowatt hour for each kilowatt hour that you're pushing into the grid. And you have to pay 28 colones to run that meter backwards. However, that is a kilowatt hour that you will use at nighttime, and that kilowatt hour actually costs you 142 colones. So you have an access fee of 28 colones to spin the meter backwards, but that reduces a kilowatt hour that costs 142 colones. So the difference is about 110 colones that you're saving by spinning your meter backwards with each kilowatt hour that you produce and don't use in the daytime. But if you were, say, running your air conditioner, or if you were a commercial operation and you're you're running machinery or so on in the middle of the day. The electricity that you produce with that solar array and you use at that time, you actually save the entire 142 colones rather than just the 110. So hopefully that sort of clears up that issue, because there's a lot of confusion about this access fee and how it's bad because you just lose money doing this, but actually you're still gaining money. You're just not gaining it quite as fast when you're using that net meter to produce electricity in the daytime and then use it again at night. Now on the commercial end, you say has a bit higher charges. You're using meters that are that cost a little more, and they just charge more because it is commercial building. National electric codes are a little more strict with commercial installations, and so there's more for them to inspect. So the feasibility study is 175,000 colones. That includes doing your plan review of your engineered stamp drawings, and any installation that you go get a permit for with any power company is going to require an engineered stamp drawing. Your interconnection and inspection, final inspection fee is 130,000 colones, and any re-inspections, say you didn't get it right the first time and they have to come back and inspect again, that's another 130,000 colones. So if you're looking at your initial inspection, and your 2 meters, you're up to around 535,000 colones, and then you have to add in the meter base to put your meter in and wire that up, so you can add another 150,000 colones for that. Commercial, small commercial, the tariff is also 28 colones for each kilowatt hour you spin the meter backwards. Generally in commercial, you use a lot of electricity in the daytime, so there's going to be a lot less of that backwards spinning of the meter, and actually you'll be able to recover not paying for the electricity that you would normally pay from the grid. Now, Coop Guanacaste, look at this as between Coop Guanacaste and ICE. Coop Guanacaste, their feasibility study costs 11,000 colones. Their interconnection fee, which is their inspection and installation of the bidirectional meters, is 49,000 colones, and then they have 25,000 colones for each meter that you have to install. So your total cost for your permit and installation on their end is 121,000 colones. You will still, though, also have to pay 150,000 colones for the meter base and disconnect, circuit protection, and wiring. When that's all said and done, then your access fee, your tarifa de acceso, is 21,000 colones. I'm sorry, that's a lot. 21 colones instead of 28. So you have a much lower access fee with Coop Guanacaste than you do, and also much lower installation costs. I would clarify that with Coop Guanacaste, when you do have your inspection and your interconnection fee here, that 49,000 colones, and the initial study inspecting your system that you're installing. What is required there is that your engineer sends a letter verifying that the installation has been done according to the drawing, which meets National Electric Code. So it's going to require an inspection by the actual engineer that did the drawing. There will be those costs, along with the cost of the engineered study that has to be stamped to by the Association of Engineers. So if we look at residential and we're looking at a payback or return on investment, Coop Guanacaste charges 121,000 colones. Your extras are 150,000 colones. Your access fee is 21 colones. When we do a ROI study, we put in the guaranteed power production, which is going to be less than you actually make. Normally, because we like to be conservative and we like people to be happier about what they did than what we offer them in our initial proposal. and that normally degradation over 25 years is less than 10% for solar panels that have been up now 30 to 35 years. There's still 10% degradation over that amount of time. Our costs also include the inflation of electricity costs for residential customers in Coop Guanacaste, and that inflation, we're looking at 12.71% per year. That's the historical inflation over the past, I believe it was what, 16 years that this inflation number is from. Yeah, past 16 years. So if we move that forward with the same type of inflation rate, you're looking at 12.71% per year that you're going to pay for electricity, that more next year than this year and more the following year, and so on. So we're looking at a house that consumes 300 kilowatt hours a month. And this is a small system. It's 4 panels or 1 kilowatt. So we're expecting when we do a system like that, we're going to produce 50% of the power for your electricity bill. And we're assuming that you're actually using half your power in the daytime. Say you're running your air conditioner and your pool pump and so on. But I'm going to say if you have a swimming pool, your kilowatt hour per month is much higher than 300 anyway, and air conditioners. But let's look at 300 kilowatt hours per month for a small home that's very conservative. And 50% of the electric bill, we don't look at adding in the access fee. So what we're talking about is self-consumption during the daytime and reducing your electricity bill by 50%. So you're still going to pay half of your electric bill, but the other half you're not after you put the system in. So with that type of return, you're looking at with Coop Guanacaste is in year 6, you would be money ahead. Now this is say you invest in a system that's was 1,000 watts. So say around a $3,000 investment, a little bit more with your permitting and so on. Your return comes back to you by year 6. By year 25, you saved about $18,000 with that $3,000 investment. So that's how we can see that you would be money ahead over continuing to just pay the power company. With commercial, we're actually just looking at ICE's commercial. Coop Guanacaste, you're going to have a little better return. So we're just go with ICE and will be fairly conservative. But with a EC installation where you use 5,000 kilowatt hours a month with the installation of 75 panels, you're looking at roughly a 4-year return on that investment. If you put in 150 panels, say 27 kilowatts, and I believe I have this on a better slide later on, so we'll just move past there, but we're looking at a 5-year return. So your payback on residential with ICE, with a 4-panel system, 50% of your power, ICE has an inflation rate of 11.9% a year. So Coop Guanacaste is a little bit higher, but ICE pretty much along that same line. With a 4-panel system with ICE, still your payback period is around 5 years, and your return is about $30,000 at the end of 25 years. It's a little bit higher than it is with Coop Guanacaste because of the cost of electricity with ICE. Surprisingly enough, ICE sells electricity to Coop Guanacaste. Coop Guanacaste turns around and sells it to you, but they charge you less than ICE does when they sell it to their customers directly. It sounds like there's something wrong with that model, but I'm not the one to criticize them. Maybe I am. Anyway, so an 8-panel system, 2 kilowatts for residential. Or look at ICE with all the costs for your permitting and then the extras, the access fee of 28 colonies. We're looking at 100% production of your electricity for a 300 kilowatt hour a month bill, and so that means that we're actually 70% of the electricity that you're adding this 28 colony fee to to give it some credibility on how much that you're actually going to use. And that puts you in a, well, your return is back at the end of year 6. So beginning of year 7, you're actually money ahead. And your return with an 8-panel system is going to be, looks to be around $32,000, $34,000 at the end of that year 25. And let's just look at this, say, as opposed to doing what you're doing now, which is just paying the power company. You're essentially renting your power rather than owning it. If you own your own system, you're not renting anymore from the guys that have the equipment to make it. And I like this analogy that a friend of mine told me. Well, you know, at the end of 6 years here with this scenario, you now get that energy for free. That electricity that you invested into is now free. And I don't know, does it, at the end of year 6, say 6 years from now, you go into ESA and say, hey, you know, I've been a really good customer. How about you guys give me the electricity for free? Do you think they'll do that? Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly not. Here's an example. This is actually an example of a customer in Alajuela, Mango Hotel. They're in return on investment for a commercial rate, an actual payment for a 5,000 kilowatt hour a month bill, which is around $1,600. If we produce half their electricity with a 19 kilowatt system, they would go into the black and their overall savings over 25 years is a little less than $500,000. It's around $460,000. That being on, even if you went with a $3 watt system, you're talking about less than $60,000 investment, with a return that ends up close to $500,000. If we did a 37 kilowatt system that produces all of their electricity, we would look at that half of that producing actually pays that access fee of 28 colones to run the meter backwards, and then you use it again at night. With that type of scenario, you have a payback of a little bit less than 5 years. So with this commercial rate and doing that installation, within 5 years, you're money ahead. And at the end of 25 years, you're again close to $500,000 ahead, a little over 450, 470,000, looks like by this graph. Money ahead over doing nothing. We just kind of get off this subject a little bit. We are advocates of using microinverters. We've tested several different types. We also have been using string inverters, microinverters. Like I mentioned before, one of my first microinverter systems was installed in 2010. With microinverters, shade is less of a problem because there's one inverter for each panel. So when one panel gets shaded, it doesn't take out the whole string. The alternative is a string inverter, where you string together 24 volt or 36 volt panels on your roof, and you add up that voltage until it gets up pretty high, so that you can operate a string inverter efficiently. But with string inverter, all of your panels have to be facing the same direction. So with microinverters, they can be installed in different directions and still produce maximum power. You have monitoring down to the panel level. So if you ever did have a panel that failed for some reason or another, and I've never seen that happen, I have seen connections that have become a problem. So if you're starting to see a problem with connection, or say a tree branch blows up on a panel and now it's not operating, you will find that out by your monitoring service. The other thing you do is you keep that 1,000 volts of DC off your roof. Now, I'm not saying you'd have 1,000 volts on a homeowner's roof, but code for homeowners is 600 volts. Code for commercial is 1,000 volts, and now it's going up to I believe it's 1,500 volts. commercial projects. Okay, so 1,000 volts, that's a lot. I mean, I recall a system I put in Colorado one time when I was doing one last thing, and it was almost dark. I mean, it was almost dark, and I thought, oh, this thing won't have hardly any current in it, and I didn't want to go up on the roof to trip all the breakers on the combiner box. So, and I was doing a little work on the inverter, and I touched the wrong wire, and believe me, even when it's almost dark, 600 volts will get your attention. So there's no DC current on the roof with microinverter other than connecting into that inverter from the panels, and that keeps your DC current down to about 36 volts or less, and certainly the amperage is way down. There are less components. Well, you have more inverters, but you don't have the big box down there. You don't have to have separate combiner boxes. You don't need to use DC breakers, which are DC fuses, because breakers don't usually go up to the voltage that you're trying to do. So there's other components that you don't have to use with microinverters that makes it quite a bit simpler. And the other thing, you can actually buy microinverters that have a 25-year warranty, or you could buy microinverters with a little bit extra money on different types of models to pay for a 25-year warranty on them. So then your inverter actually matches your panel with that 25-year power production warranty. And the other thing, I think, there are people that are pretty savvy and can do construction here that I've noticed. And when you are looking to do or save money on a solar array, and if you're going to be doing a smaller one, of course, actually pretty simple to be able to do a do-it-yourself, use a do-it-yourself kit, which we sell, and do the installation yourself. Of course, if you're getting a permit, you still have to have the engineered stamp drawing and help with the application. You probably will need some help with instructions on how to install this, and then you have to have the subsequent inspection afterwards to make sure it was done according to code. My favorite part about microinverters are the price is coming down. They're coming down to the point where they match string inverters in cost. So this is a great thing. I see that there are other companies professing power shaving, which is for self-consumption electricity where you don't send anything back in the grid. AP Systems is one of the microinverter companies we use, and I really like their product. They're actually coming up with now a power shaving monitor device so that it actually shuts down inverters when you get to the point where you're going to be putting electricity back in the grid. Or say you have 20 microinverters and you reach the point where you're producing so much power in the middle of the day, right at that midday peak, and if you're not using enough, it may shut one or two inverters down and still be producing the rest of electricity. If you had a string inverter, the only option is for it to shut entirely down and shut your whole solar array off if you're going to be pushing electricity back to the grid. So there's another advantage with using the smaller microinverter system. Now, I'm going to give this as an example. Moraes International Home School over in Samara, they installed a system. Well, they got people to donate for this system actually through a fundraiser, which is really, really quite progressive on their part, and had us put this system in. We donated our time to do the installation and sold them the products. And this is some of the information you get off of the EMA or the data logger device. It's very simple. You just plug it into a wall socket and it starts reading the code that comes from the inverters and finds out what the inverters are producing, making, so on. It sends it back to the main office, goes onto the internet where you can pick this up with any computer or cell phone device or iPad or whatever. You can actually look at how your power is being produced, even if you're back in Canada. So you not only can do daily performance, this is a weekly, one of the weeks that this system was producing electricity. And then this is the there's a month which this was producing electricity. You might see a couple of days where there's no power. That's something we finally worked out. The problem was somebody was going into one of the classrooms where we had our data logger plugged in and unplugging it to plug in a projector or something. And then they just left it unplugged. So those days we lost the data, but all the rest of that is actual power production from the school. And if, as the installer, I have a little different portal than the public has. I can actually look at in each inverter. I can see what it's making every day. This is the daily output for the 4 solar panels that are on that roof. And we've done this as a test with 2 panels facing east, 2 panels facing west, rather than the south facing array normally, because we're trying to do self-consumption and shave the power off the middle day production so that we can add enough to kind of meet what the demand is in the middle of the day. So this is actually a test to see we can actually see the power curves in the morning, or the east facing array peaks out in the morning at around 10 to facing array peaks out at around 2 to 3, rather than the whole thing peaking out at noon. So when you add those two together, then you kind of flatten out that midday peak. The other thing that we can do with this, and this is very interesting, is that because of the instability of the electricity here in Costa Rica, the voltage parameters are set on every inverter. When it reaches a certain over voltage rate, then the inverter shuts down. Inverters there previously on this project, they kept shutting down, and the manufacturer said, well, the problem is it keeps reading a code of over voltage, and it was happening a lot. So, well, they lost out. AP Systems won in that we switched it out to these systems. We can actually go to each inverter you could do it from your cell phone and change the parameters on the high and low voltage on these inverters so that they would operate through voltage. We haven't had to do that with these. They actually are set well enough that they can produce the electricity throughout the day without ever shutting down. So what are your potential alternatives? Well, you can keep paying the power company money, and they like that. It buys some nice cars and stuff for the say employees, and so anyway, or you can buy a solar PV system for cash and stop paying for electricity. So if you have some money to invest, I can tell you this is much better investment than the stock market. It's much better investment by far than CDs or something like that. You are the one who off taker, or the one that's paying this or gaining from this. So is it a bad investment because it's a high risk? Well, not really, because you're always going to be paying for that electricity. You can buy a solar system with credit, a PV system with credit, and still, actually, even with the banks here, at the rate the banks charge in Costa Rica, and we all know what that is, much higher than the States, but you can actually still sign for the project and pay less than you're paying the power company from day one that system starts making electricity. What's another alternative? Well, you could move into a yurt with no electricity. Or you could sell your home here and move back to Canada. Then you could burn that tar sands. Okay, well, just a little fun, money out the window. When we looked at solar energy originally with my original company, Alpine Solar Design in Colorado, I also went to look at energy efficiency because I could see there was a lot of wasted energy, and back in 2008 was rather expensive, quite expensive. And so why not save electricity first, energy first, rather than producing electricity? Because as we found, and I think it was one of our slogans, is that the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. And there's your option to go move into a yurt. So energy efficiency. Boy, how do you avoid the problem of excess heat in your home? You can get out of the sun, because that sun has a lot of energy. Well, there's a concept. Why not use it? You know, when you do install solar panels on top of your roof, the roof itself is no longer in the sun, and so you actually do reduce the amount of radiant heat that enters your house that way. You look at your energy use and trim the waste. That's a key issue. Is everybody wastes energy, and in Costa Rica, I can tell you, with the way buildings are constructed and so on, there's a lot of waste, and they're a little bit slower right now in moving forward on energy efficiency than as far as the government. So it's a bit slower than the government has been in the United States in offering incentives for people to actually become more. I think it's going to come around. Even just market rates will push the lowering of energy waste. You could get an energy audit. We do energy audits with a thermal camera. We also have a blower door that causes a pressure differential in your home or business, so that you can see where your leakages are, and you can also see where you have lack of and say a lot of radiation that re-radiates back into your building. And so even though you can turn the air conditioner up, yeah, you'll still be, comfortable, but you sure are wasting a lot just to cool down the outside. When you do an audit, I recommend you do the recommended changes. This is the company that did actually do the recommended changes. It's an ice factory in downtown, and this particular day was probably in Fahrenheit, it was probably about 90 to 95 outside. And this is inside the walk-in freezer. So this is a structure, a large room where all the ice is stored. And as you can see, up around the top edge, it's up to 19 degrees centigrade. Pretty warm for being inside a freezer. This is the same, looking at the same angle, and if you look real close, you can see the dirt that has accumulated on that wood beam. And that dirt, normally when you see dirt or dirty edge around a window or something, it's because air moves through there quite a bit, and so you have a leak. So if you start seeing dirt, if you actually see spider webs, the spiders like to put themselves where, so if you see spider webs, it generally is because there's air movement there, and you got a leak. Uninsulated roofs. This is a interesting photo of 54 degrees centigrade. It shows there is a spot temperature. And I have architects tell me, oh, we don't need insulation because we have tile roof. Well, I've been on those tile roofs and they get really hot. That radiation does go back up into the air, but about half of it goes right down into the building. So when you have radiant heat that keeps going into your building at night, might be okay if you're up in the mountains up above San Jose, but certainly not okay when you're down in Guanacaste. At the time when the temperature outside may be in Fahrenheit 85 degrees outside, you don't need a lot of extra heat pumping back into your house when you're trying to air condition it. So insulation of roofs are one thing. Attic spaces, we look at walls, construction techniques. Usually you can get a payback from our recommendations from doing an audit within 3 to 4 months, that you actually recover that expense and now you're money ahead. And this is our Minneapolis blower door. It's the only one in Costa Rica. It does creates pressure buildings so that you can look at how much air leakage you have. On a more simpler end, you can also use it to do blower door directed air sealing. So if you have certain, you create a pressure differential in your house, and then you go around with the thermal camera and look for all the leaks, and then you can use expanded foam or whatever to seal those off, and that reduces your leakage and certainly lowers your electric bill considerably. This particular project right here was stuck in the door of the walk-in freezer. And when we did the audit, we went upstairs. Jose, my engineer, and myself were upstairs, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" He says, "It feels kind of." And I said, "That's really not a good sign, because it was probably 85 degrees, 90 degrees in that building, and it was much cooler up on the roof." So then we went up, crawled around, and found leaks that we hadn't found before, including a 5-inch hole through the wall that was covered by the vinyl laminate. These are ways to find things that you wouldn't normally see, but actually do exist and are repairable. So our recommendation is to take the first step. Oh, and we're going to have to go back, but I could show you. Anyway, we have a link that's on our web for free estimate. And if you just go on to Solar Costa Rica at the free estimate link that says goes to our document that you can fill out and give us the information we need to give you a reasonable cost estimate and return estimate for a solar installation. And so you can email us for questionnaires on so your choice, and I always like the Rose of the River photo on the left because it sort of signifies what the United States did to oppose what was happening, was creating a problem in the world. I think it's something we should look at together. The photo on the right is actually Olga from Germany. She's out here on, and I asked her to help do this installation on the roof. It was a bit different on the roof because she overcame some of those fears and worked with some big man-made tools. Helped install this thing. It was something she said at the end was, you know, it's something I'll never forget. And I think that if you look at project, you know, you can do it. You can save money, and you certainly will be saving on power and your comfort. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and at solar.rica, or just type in Costa Rica. Give us a call, accept online. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to